Well, hi once again.
Hello.
And yes, and well, hi there to you too. And hi to everyone listening. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here. Today we get to visit with Kim Miles. And Kim has a company with a very clever name, and I'm going to let her tell you because I don't want to spoil it. She has a lot of interesting stories to tell. She's a very creative individual by any standard. And I really am glad that you're going to spend some time with us today. So welcome aboard, Kim.
No, I feel honored. Thank you. It was really so great to get to know you on our initial call. And it's just been fun learning about you and Accessibility ever since. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, one of the things that we do for those who may not really have caught on over the last number of episodes is before we do a podcast, I love to get a chance to meet virtually in person whoever is going to come on the podcast, because it's great to get to know them and for them to get to know me and make sure we're all comfortable with the podcast, which is, as you all know, a conversation. And so Kim and I connected and here we are. So I'm very glad you're here, and I expect that we will have fun today.
I agree.
And you are in Boston, and what's the temperature back there?
We cannot seem to get out of our own way. We had the most glorious Memorial Day weekend, which we don't typically have. So that was a surprise. It was absolute perfection. And then ever since then, it's been cold here. Everybody's been joking around that they put away their winter coats far too early. And so we are really hovering in the 50s and 60s here. We're trying desperately to warm up. So we're praying for warmer weather, but it'll come. And then we'll be complaining it's too hot. We're never
That's right.
In England. We're never happy in New England.
It's not just New England. I am fascinated when I listen to weather prognosticators like out here. When it's really hot, of course, we have greater chances of fires, wildfires.
Right.
Used to be called forest fires, but now Smokey Bear calls them wildfires. Anyway, whatever. But the issue is that when it's really hot, the whole Southern California area is much more susceptible to fires. And so now we have also primarily had much cooler weather. It's going to get up to 72 today, they say. It's 67 outside right now, and it's about 11:35 in the morning. But the thing is that what people have been complaining about, the weather people, is the May gray and the June gloom. They're complaining about that. Every single weather forecast, I always hear about the May gray or the June gloom is still with us. The marine layer's there. We're not getting the sun. But you are absolutely right. What's going to happen is once it starts to really heat up, then they're going to complain about it being too hot and the chance of fires. There's no pleasing them, and they teach us all that, which is unfortunate.
Well, I don't know if you know the saying, but if you live in New England and you don't like the weather, just wait a minute. It'll change.
Yep. Well, I lived in Winthrop for 3 years and spent a lot of time in the Boston area, so I understand.
I know. You totally know. Exactly.
New Englanders are very opinionated. I remember a couple of times at the beginning of baseball season, the Red Sox lost the first game of the season, and the immediate thing I started hearing from everyone is, wait till next year.
Well, here's what the old adage says, though. The seasons are not won in April, but they are lost in April. So if you don't have a strong start in April, you're likely doomed. Of course, crazier things have happened, but that is the old adage. And yeah, we're very spoiled here in Boston. I have to say, I have a conversation with a friend of mine who lives out west, and he's always saying, do you know how lucky you guys are? Do you know how spoiled you guys are that you have a team in every sport to look forward to? And I realize we're spoiled. I understand that completely. But it's, when you're a born and bred New Englander, you get used to it. And, we have high standards for our sports teams, I suppose.
or at least, or maybe lower high standards for fans. It's hard to say.
Touche.
I remember when Steve Grogan was the quarterback for the Patriots, and people didn't like him, and they actually booed him off the field one game, which was, I thought, a little bit amazing. I heard of that concept before, but never actually saw it. But of course, I also was back in Boston living there when Mike Eruzione and the Olympic team in 1980 won hockey against the Russians.
Yes, that was, that's, and if you've ever seen the movie, That movie is such an amazing, such an amazing movie. The story of it is it's one of the greats. It's one of the sports greats.
Yeah, well, and by any standard, it is.
By any standard, I
By
concur
any standard,
completely.
it was great and it was wonderful. And that was the year I think they also introduced First Night in Boston, and he and I think some of the team made an appearance at a couple of the subway stations. So it was kind of fun.
That's back in the day. That's
back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah.
Back in the day. Well, tell us a little bit about you, maybe the younger Kim growing up and all that, and let's see how we get to where we are now.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's always the question, right? How is it that you did get to where you are now? It's always or you hope that it's an interesting story. I think in my case that it is.
Much less not only how you get there, but where are you? No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Exactly. Well, for me, I've always been a very, very creative kid. I was always a very creative person. I was always the one who gravitated toward theater and music. I've been singing my whole life, and I definitely, have a huge appreciation for the arts and sports, but definitely for the arts. And, all through high school, I sang with, state choirs, and I was on stage with all of my performances. And when I went and lived in Manhattan after I graduated, I joined a very large chorus there, which was a very renowned chorus in New York. It was a Greek Orthodox choir. And that was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And every step of I would say, of my life, there's always been something creative going on. So much so that I went to school specifically for television, radio, and film production. I went to Syracuse University at the Newhouse School of Communications, and I graduated with a television, radio, and film production degree. And so for me, my final exams were putting together and producing television shows and writing scripts and producing CDs. I'm sure that there are a lot of younger people who will be listening to this and not remembering what CDs are, but back in the day, CDs were the hot technology, So those were my final exams. And when I graduated, I drove straight to New York City from Syracuse the same week I graduated, and was trying desperately to get a job in what for me felt was my goal, which was my ideal job. Because I loved sports and grew up so much with sports, I really wanted to do what I call sports package production. So if you ever watch any of the championship games, or if you watch the Olympics, they always do human interest stories on the athletes. There's always a story behind the athlete. And so, or a story behind the team, right? Or how the team got to where they are. So those packages that we call them, somebody has to produce those. Somebody has to write the scripts and edit the footage and pick the music. And that was the stuff that I loved to do. It's kind of funny now, if you think now, everybody has access to that on their iPhone, right? So in their own hand, they can edit a story, they can edit a reel on Instagram, they can make their own little movie on their phone. But back in the day, that was something a bit more specific to the industry. And so that's what I really wanted to do. And that was back in the 90s. And I had interviews at the NBA. I wanted to work at the NBA. And even back in the 90s, they didn't really hire a lot of women. So I was a professional waitress for a while until I got my big break. And I finally got a job with a couple of different commercial production companies. And some of their clients were Burger King and Lancome. And so I watched these people make these commercials that you would see on TV. And then I got a job working for a management company who was a manager for a lot of very famous comedians. And those comedians were very unhappy people. It was a very interesting job because it was a very sort of, it kind of gave me an introduction to like the dark underbelly of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized very quickly that was not really for me. So a friend of mine actually acknowledged something in me that I didn't see in myself, which she said, Kim, you're such a people person and you're great with people and people really respond to you. You really should try your hand at sales. And so I actually pivoted to a very, very long and lucrative career in technology sales in Manhattan. And I was doing that up until 9/11, which is something, of course, you and I have in common.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about that, and of course, your story is profound, and everybody has their story. And I work down there as well, and we've shared those stories. But it was time for me to go home after 9/11, and so I came back to Boston. And when I came back to Boston, I actually was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so I was meeting with different people and having different cups of coffee. And my father came to me one day and he said, "You know, Kim, I think you should meet this gentleman that I just met. He was an accountant and he now is a financial advisor and he works for this life insurance company. I think you should have a cup of coffee with him." And I looked at my father and I said, "Dad, I'm your only daughter. Do you know me? I don't know how it is that you want me to go sell life insurance, but here I am 20 years later, and I've been a very successful financial advisor for 20 years for the same company, and I love what I do. But that creative side of me has always been with me and has always been the kind of thing where I, wanted it to be a part of my life. And so 9 years ago, I launched my production company, Miles and Heels Productions. And that was really born out of something very specific, which was I was volunteering my time and my efforts for my local chamber of commerce. And I was doing all sorts of event production for them and raising them all sorts of money. And after doing that for them on a volunteer basis for 10 years, I realized that I could put my own moniker on my talents and offer my talents and my services to lots of different organizations and companies. And so 9 years ago, Miles and Heels was born. And so I run my two businesses side by side, which makes me a bit of a unicorn, using my right brain and my left brain on all facets. And so that's where, the creative side of me gets to come in, and I get to play and do what I like to do through Miles and Heels Productions.
Cool. Well, a question that I have, going back to what you talked about earlier regarding the whole concept of producing the information for athletes and so on. Do you produce those, and do they oftentimes just sit in the can waiting for someone to come along who needs them, or do you usually just produce them when they're needed?
Are you talking about me specifically, what I produce for my clients, or are you talking about the people who work in the industry for the athletes?
I'm thinking in general. Does a lot of that stuff get produced in advance and then it sits until it's needed, or do anyone?
No, I think that those are very specific asks, right? There's usually very specific initiative that they're producing those for. I certainly know that in the case with my clients, we're producing a package for something very specific. We're trying to promote an event, or there's some sort of a milestone that they're trying to promote. But in the case of athletes, those are very timely, right? Mm-hmm. Those are definitely things that are going on right in the moment, right? So case in point, right now we're in the NBA finals, and, there are a lot of really wonderful human interest stories about how those two teams got there. As far as, Miami right now, they were the 8th seed. So they weren't really expected to do as well as they've done here in the NBA finals. They beat the Celtics. So, the number 2 seed, we weren't happy about that. Right. The point is that they're definitely going out and they're producing packages that are timely and germane to what's going on right now, for sure.
Now, I know in the case of obituaries and so on, it's a little different animal. I'm sure they do a lot of preparation. And if someone happens to pass, it's amazing how fast that gets up. They must have a lot of that already done and stored away and ready to use.
With technology today, what's amazing is how accessible footage is, right? So think about the statisticians who are commenting during the game. So these commentators who are calling the game, or, you're listening to these people, they've got people feeding those stats in their ear, right? So, it's amazing what technology can do. You can bring up that information in those stats at the drop of a hat. So being able to get that footage, it's just that those people who are in production, like myself, it's poring over that footage. And, that's the really sort of, that's the cumbersome part of it. It's like it's a labor of love, but you have to pour over that sort of information and that footage to get the right footage and then string it all together.
And it's so much easier today to do that and to edit it and to produce something that is worth seeing, because our whole world of technology has made that a lot easier. I know when I worked in radio, back in college, which goes back to the 70s, when you wanted to edit something, you cut and spliced tape. And I was never a great splicer. But now, of course, with digital audio editors, it's amazing.
Well, just again, back to my original point, which is I'm floored by what you can accomplish on your iPhone. I mean, you can master some significant editing on your iPhone, and they're always changing the technology up. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot easier to do, and the technology has come so far. But creating those stories, I think that really the editing has tons to do with it. The music that is chosen, the vibe, the scripting, but it's the storytelling. Everybody loves to hear stories. That's what they relate to. And you, more than anybody, with your amazing book and your amazing story, people gravitate towards storytelling, and that's what ends up resonating with them. And that's stories become long lasting for them. And it's the same in sports. It's the same in the arts. It's the same anywhere. So
it is the same anywhere. And, any really good salesperson is all about telling stories.
They're about telling stories, and they're also about, being really relatable. For me, the reason why I have had such a wonderful career, both in technology sales and in the financial services industry, is not necessarily because I'm the smartest person in the room. It's because I know about relationship building and relationship cementing and about relationship selling. And think about yourself as a consumer, right? If you are having an experience that you're not enjoying, how many times have you gone on to maybe work with somebody else, whether it be in a store or on the phone or whatever? I mean, that's just sort of a fact of life. And I feel that when the relationship is cemented first and that trust is built, and of course you have to be smart, but I think that that's the foundation first. And then the sort of the acumen comes almost second in a way.
And you also have to be honest and straightforward and not mislead, especially when you're in sales, which all too often happens. The best salespeople are people who are honest about what they have, what they do, and what they can do and not do for a particular customer.
Well, it only takes one bad experience for somebody to be soured on something, right? So a lot of times so in my financial services practice, somebody will come to me and they'll say, I haven't had the best experience with financial advisors in the past. And my job is to change that for them. I want them to have a good experience. I want them to feel good about the planning that they're doing for themselves, their businesses, their families. But it's the same thing when I work with my clients with Miles and Heels Productions. Let's say that they had a terrible experience running an event once, and now they're hiring me to come in and help them run an event. I want that experience to change for them. I want them to have a different experience altogether, and I want them to have a completely positive taste in their mouth. I don't want them to have a negative taste in their mouth. That's part of my job, So I agree. It only takes one bad apple to spoil the bunch, unfortunately.
It does, and it only takes one mistake on the part of a salesperson to lose that relationship, because we're so geared toward not necessarily trusting that it tends to be a challenge too.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough time to live in. I mean, let's talk about the fact that there's a lot of mistrust that's being sort of spread and perpetuated. And while social media can be both a blessing and a curse, unfortunately, sometimes technology can work against us where sometimes misinformation is what is being put forth. And so it's getting harder and harder, especially with AI, to discern what is accurate and truthful and real. And those can be some scary things. So, in terms of something that I hold to the highest esteem is integrity, right? And honesty. And I only have this one reputation. And so it means everything to me to make sure that I'm protecting it, and to make sure that, as my mother always said, if you always do the right thing, you never have to wonder if you did the right thing.
Right.
I live by that. So.
Well, and that makes perfect sense. If you always do the right thing, you never have to worry about doing the right thing, which makes a lot of sense. How did you come up with the name Miles and Heels Productions?
Well, after having done so much work, like I said, on a volunteer basis for one particular organization, and when I wanted to put forth my own company and put my own stamp on things and really go out to other organizations, I needed something that was going to really encapsulate for me what I'm all about, what I'm known for, and really what I stand for. And so for me, I have a complete, as you can see right here, and for those watching, my little magic red shoe. I have a complete shoe obsession. I'm known for my shoes. They are my favorite accessory in the whole world. Um, and so I really became synonymous with my shoe collection. And so the fact that my last name is Miles, thanks to my husband, um, walking a mile in heels is a great metaphor for life and for women who are doing things outstanding every day and sometimes having to try a little bit harder as a female. And so for me, Miles and Heels was actually the first name I thought of. It wasn't even hard. It was something that just kind of really came to me, and putting my talents and skills and my offerings under the umbrella of a production company just made sense, because I wear a lot of different hats for my clients when it comes to Miles and Heels Productions. And so having that global umbrella of a production company just made sense for me. But Miles and Heels was just an obvious choice, and it came to me quickly and it stuck. So.
And it makes perfect sense,
Yes.
especially the way you explain it. So what's the company logo?
Well, the company logo is actually two high-heeled shoes facing each other, forming the shape of an M. So it's trademarked, and it was one of the first things I did because I was not willing to part with that. My genius brand strategist, who's a dear, dear friend of mine, she and I worked on the brand from day one, and she's the person who, has helped me bring my brand to life. And so, yeah, my logo is very, very, very representative, wholeheartedly and comprehensively of who I am and what my company is.
So you are still doing financial advising while also operating Miles and Heels Productions.
Yeah, I have to tell you. So, my 20 years of being a financial advisor has given me incredible business acumen in order to be able to run my businesses. And, when you are a financial advisor, you really are running your own business. And so it was, I don't want to say it was easy to launch a second business, but I certainly knew what I was doing. And I've been very fortunate in the respect that I am somebody who's highly motivated, highly organized, and definitely can, wear both hats simultaneously. They complement each other really beautifully. And I feel very blessed that I'm able to fashion my day and my week and my month and my year the way I need to be able to accommodate both my businesses. And it's just been, for the past 9 years, it's been such a beautiful experience. And both of the businesses help each other. And I'm really proud to have been able to sustain my business for 20 years and launch a new business at the same time.
When you're running the business, especially Miles and Heels Productions, what are some of the most fun projects and the most fun things that you've done, and why are they kind of more fun to do than other things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for me, I get incredibly jazzed about, first of all, I love connecting people, right? So my Twitter handle is serial connector and shoe collector. I really love bringing people together in a convivial atmosphere. I love connecting people. I love mentoring people, lifting people up, helping people and collaborating with people. So one of my favorite things to do, and it's certainly what I'm probably the most known for, is when organizations or companies are coming to me in two different elements. The first element they'll come to me with is, Kim, we've been running this event, this fundraiser, this gala, this banquet, this business conference. We've been running this for the past, 10, 15, 20 years, and it's been great, but we recognize that we need to evolve. We need to really add a little bit of life to this and have a new spin on it. And we'd like you to come in and really resurrect this event. So I love to get in there, get my hands dirty, and everything from ideation to execution in terms of concept, branding, A-list talent, how we're going to market the event, how we're going to raise money for the event. All of that strategy I love. The second way a client will come to me is that they'll say that they have an idea for an event, but they don't know how to go about bringing it to fruition. And so again, getting in on that ground floor and bringing all my areas of expertise. I just really love when the end result is you've got, 200, 500, 1,000 people in a room, and they're all coming together for a common purpose, for a common gathering, and they leave better than when they came. Right? That's my biggest reward. they come to that event, they say things like, that was the most special fundraiser I've been to. That was the most fun. I met the best people. I felt great when I left. Moving people, and it's like storytelling, right? Having them leave and feel differently than when they came in or started is my goal as an event strategist.
Now, you call yourself an event strategist. How is that different than event planning, as it were?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I'm constantly explaining because it's so critical. So I do call myself an event strategist and an executive producer. And the reason why that's different than an event planner is because I actually have to hire event planners for my events. So event planners really usually focus on things like catering and lighting and linens and, bartending services and things of that nature. For me, I'm really the event strategist and the executive producer of an event. I'm really talking about, what is the messaging of this event? What is our goal with this event? Are we fundraising? How do we structure our sponsorship opportunities? What do you want the messaging to be to your attendees? What kind of speakers are we going to get? What kind of A-list talent do we have to get? How do we get people to sign up for this event and again leave them feeling better than when they came? So I'm really digging in at a completely different level than an event planner. And as I said at the top of the hour, I'm a bit of a unicorn in this space because people hire me for both my business acumen and my creative side, because both sides of my brain are working at the same time all the time. And so I'm not just a creative. I'm paying attention to margins. I'm paying attention to strategy. I'm paying attention to branding and content creation for my clients. So there's a lot more that goes into it than simply making the room look pretty. Event planners are necessary and critical. I'm not at all dismissing or diminishing what they do. I need them. I need fantastic event planners to come into my event and help me create an amazing environment. So I hire event planners to come in as part of my event strategy to create the vibe that I need for my clients.
At the same time, you're, as you said, or as Emeril Lagasse would say, kicking it up a notch, and you are enhancing the event. And I'm sure that one of the most gratifying things for you is when someone comes up to you after an event and says, we've never had an event like this here before.
That, without question. I mean, unequivocally, and I'm proud to say that at all of my events, somebody has always come up to me after the fact or reached out to me after the fact, and they've said, I saw you, on stage, you were emceeing this event, or I noticed that you produced this event and I had such a good time at that event. We want to work with you for this event for the same kind of magic. Or when it comes to fundraising, I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that I can unequivocally say that for all the clients who hire me, even if they're paying me my fee, when it comes to fundraising, I am instilling practices and strategies for them where they are absolutely knocking their fundraising goals out of the park. And for a lot of my fundraising clients that I work with, we have consistently over the past 9 years raised more money each year from working with me than the year prior. And that's something I'm incredibly proud of, because the causes that I work with are incredibly worthy, and fundraising means everything to them. It's how they keep their lights on. It's how they help their clients. So for me, that's one of the biggest compliments.
So are most of the events that you do with more not-for-profits doing fundraising? Do you do events for or work with corporations on internal meetings and so on that they might produce?
All of the above. It's not limited. It really isn't limited. I love to come in when it's a business kickoff meeting, and case in point, I came into a law firm sort of when we were just coming out of COVID, just really coming out of COVID, and they really needed to get people excited about coming back into the office. And so we did an on-site for them, and it really got people more comfortable and more excited about coming back. But nonprofits and fundraising is an arena that's very dear to my heart. For me, I have to be excited, or the cause has to align with me as a person. There have been clients who have approached me in the past and have wanted to hire me, but I knew in my gut that maybe it just wasn't the right fit or a great fit. And so, you politely decline. But for the most part, I just really enjoy being able to work on things that get me excited, or that I'm excited about the cause.
Yeah. How about doing virtual events? Have you done many of those, or is that I assume it's somewhat of a different animal because you're not necessarily doing the the same kind of contact when everyone is in the room. But do you do many, or have you done many virtual events, and how do those work out?
I love this question. I have to say that when COVID hit and it was 2020 and we all pivoted to the world of virtual, I had one of my most banner years in 2020 because I had to scramble to learn about virtual production like everybody else, but everybody else needed to hire somebody at the helm to be able to continue to do their fundraising, to continue to do their events, because the world didn't stop, as we saw. And so we needed to move forward. And so I was hired by all sorts of organizations to pivot to help them with virtual events. And it was a skill that I took up very, very quickly. And I aligned myself with the right technology partners, which I still work to this day. So I always say that, my company specializes in event strategy and executive production for live, virtual, and hybrid events, because still to this day, there are people who are still putting on hybrid components to their events.
Do you think that will continue, or do you think if COVID doesn't come back, we're going to kind of forget about the whole concept of hybrid?
COVID is coming back. It's already back in China. It's on its way. There's no question about another wave. So I think COVID is something we're always going to live with. What I think has changed profoundly in the marketplace is that I think people are adjusting to the levels of productivity of being able to do things in a hybrid fashion, and that companies are excited about the fact that they have a broader reach now that they have a virtual component that they can rely on, so that they can reach more people to offer a hybrid offering. I don't think it's going away. I think that it sort of depends on what the mission and the goal is for that particular event or organization. So I think that it's not going away. Will it be as prominent? Perhaps not. But I think it's hard where we've gone, where the pendulum has swung that way and you've given that offering. It's a little bit harder to go back the other way and to leave that offering off the table, especially if you've expanded your audience. You don't want to alienate those people that you've opened your world up to.
Yeah. I know for me as a speaker, I have a challenge with doing virtual events, although I love doing them. It certainly is convenient. But the challenge is that as I am speaking, I don't get some of the same input that I get when I'm in a room with a live audience. If I say something, and I've worked on speeches, so I know what typically to expect from an audience when I make a particular statement or lead them down a particular path to get to a particular place. And when I can hear those reactions, it helps. And I don't get that information when I do a virtual presentation. And I'm sure there are equivalents for people who can see the screens as well. You're not going to see the same stuff. But having done so many presentations live, I can pretty much tell by working with the people who are coordinating the event, I can get a pretty good idea of what the audience is going to be like. So doing a virtual event doesn't scare me or bother me at all.
Well, that's a very interesting point. There is nothing that's ever going to replace the energy that you can feed off of being on stage and being in front of a live audience. And myself being a speaker like yourself, and also being a premier MC, there's nothing that's going to replace that.
Right.
I will tell you that one of my favorite stories, and it was one of the most fun challenges and adventures in the thick of COVID. One of my biggest clients, we had an A-list comedian who was the guest of honor, and we were fundraising, and I ran a live auction over Zoom. Well, it wasn't Zoom, it was another platform, but I was running a live auction to raise money. And there was a lag time between the time that the bids were coming in and between the time that I was seeing them. And so that challenge, like you're saying about that direct feedback and that direct impact, it's a very real thing. For me, when I'm emceeing an event, or if I'm speaking like yourself, the energy is a huge component. So the biggest thing for me that happened in COVID was I was selected to do a TEDx talk right when COVID hit. And so they pushed us off for a year. But as it turns out, I did my TEDx talk. However, unlike most TEDx talks, which are in front of a live audience, my TEDx talk was recorded in a studio. So I had a very unique and different TEDx experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it was a very different experience because I did not have the live audience feed and feel and energy like you're talking about. And it makes a difference.
It
There's no
does.
question.
Well, it does make a difference, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No, I think you have to learn how to adapt. If you're a business owner, you always have to learn how to adapt. And so in 2020, I learned how to adapt, and that's what I did. And now I'm proud to be able to say that I can offer people live, virtual, or hybrid events, and there's nothing we can't do for them. I've got the right technology partners, and I'm not fearful. You have to learn how to adapt, and that's what you did.
Yeah. For me, not seeing the audience is not even relevant because, as we just discussed, if I'm doing a live presentation, I get to hear a lot and probably even perhaps hear some things that someone looking at the audience might not see in the same way. But by the same token, like you, it's all about feeling the energy. And so when you're doing it virtually, you don't feel the same kind of energy. But if you've done enough talks, you ought to be able to figure out how to do a speech and make it meaningful and just as relevant. And I think I've been pretty successful at that. And it's a lot of fun to do.
Do you feel that your senses are heightened in terms of feeling that energy? Because obviously, you don't see the audience, but do you feel that there's like an even higher level of vibration of energy for you, especially?
Only if I learn to look for it and receive it. It isn't necessarily because of being blind, because that doesn't in of itself change senses. But as a speaker, you know very well what you do is you use all the skills that you have. And so for me, learning to pick up that energy, whatever it is very important. And I think that I probably pick up some different cues than you might, but we both end up at the same place pretty much.
Yeah. Which is what a great storyteller does.
Which is exactly what a great storyteller does. I have had in my life 2 speeches that I thought didn't go very well. And both of them, as it turns out, although I didn't have enough information in advance about the audiences, and both of them were to small service clubs in my local area. So we didn't even get money for it, but that's okay. It was a service. But as it turns out, in one case, most of the people couldn't even hear very well, and they weren't deaf people. They were seniors, but they seemed not to be able to pick up on what was being said. And the other one was somewhat similar. It wasn't necessarily seniors, but I never did quite figure out what their priorities were. They wanted me to come in and talk about a couple of specific subjects, and I did, but they seemed to be off in another world somewhere. But basically, that doesn't happen very often, which is, of course, very helpful.
And I think your job or our job as speakers and highly sought out speakers, and the reason why people hire us to speak is because we do have a good command on the audience. We're taking them on a journey. And, if they've seen you speak before, or if somebody's recommending you that they've heard you speak before, they walked away having felt something. So that's why they're coming back to you, is because they know you can kind of portray that energy. So, just because people are great practitioners does not make them great speakers. With my clients, they'll say, okay, we want to have this person speak. And I'll say, listen, we need to know that these people can capture the audience. It's very important. Just because they're brilliant and they're the leader in their field does not necessarily make them either an entertaining or a great speaker. And that's a huge thing. That's something that's really important, especially when you're trying to put together a killer conference or a killer business meeting. You gotta make sure that these people can get up there and hold the audience.
And the more you speak, the more you get to learn about different kinds of audiences. And so in theory, if you really practice analyzing what you do, the better you will be at holding audiences, even in new and unexpected ways and unexpected places.
Indeed. Yeah.
I remember, the last speech I gave, actually technically the second to the last speech, they were 2 days apart, was at the convention of Head Start, for children, the National
Sure.
Head Start Association convention. And I was invited to come by somebody who had had me come and speak at a school district in Michigan when she was there. And then her husband invited me to come and speak actually at Freddie Mac as well.
Uh-huh.
But then this came along, and she convinced people that I could probably hold the audience reasonably well, to be polite about it. I think she was much stronger in her words than that. But anyway, so we did the speech. There were 3,000 people there.
Wow.
And some people would say, aren't you scared of 3,000 people? No, my largest speech was about a 6-minute presentation to a church service for 6,000 people just after September 11th. So 3,000 didn't bother me. But anyway, what was really a great honor and pleasure for me was we got a standing ovation at the end.
Wow.
Which was a lot of fun.
I think what you're saying is super important, right? There's different ways that people let you know as a speaker that that what you've said has resonated with them. And, I'm always moved when I hear from somebody that I don't know at all, that will find me, that will reach out to me on my social channels, or they'll email me, or I've had people even call me before and they say, you don't know me. I caught your podcast. I was in the audience. I read your whatever it is. And if I, connect on that kind of a level that moves somebody that much for them to reach out to me, then you've done your job, right? Yeah. And it's the same thing when you're live and with the audience. So listen, there's never going to be a substitute for live and in person, but I'm glad that we've got tools so that there are substitutes for being live and in person, because we need them.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's nothing like going to see a Broadway musical or a Broadway play on Broadway.
Exactly.
There's nothing like that at all. The energy is so different. It's all live. It's not like a movie or anything like that. And it's so wonderful to have had the opportunity to experience a bunch of those. Just like seeing a live concert, there's nothing like it. It's not the same when you're watching it on TV. It's different.
Agreed.
Well, how many TEDx talks have you given? Just the one, or have you done?
I've given the one. It was incredible experience. It was a very profound. It was a profound time in my life, and it was also a very profound, cathartic moment for me. I think writing that TEDx talk was something that was one of the scarier things I've ever done, because it's actually a great story. I was working with one of my clients, Babson College here in Boston, which is the #1 entrepreneurial school. And I do a lot of work with Babson. And I was speaking in front of a group of women, and I was telling my story, and this woman in the audience raised her hand and she said, have you ever thought about giving a TED talk? And I laughed sort of out loud, and I said, oh gosh, no, I would be terrible at that. I said, I don't think that's really my jam. And she said, oh, that's too bad. She said, because I run the TEDx Babson program, and I think you'd be really amazing at it. And so I laughed, and I immediately said, well, what I meant to say was I would love to talk to you about giving a TED talk. And as it turns out, I'm so glad that I did something that scared me the most. They always say, try something every day or every year that scares you the most. And that scared me the most because I am a much more unscripted person. I am a much more off the cuff type of a person. I've done stand-up comedy before. As I mentioned, I'm a performer, I'm a singer. So for me, things that are a little bit more unscripted feels slightly more natural for me. Yeah. So the fact that this was pretty rigid and very scripted, and you have to follow a process, etc., it kind of terrified me. But it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. And I loved it so much that I then started to work with the TEDx team at Babson, and I wrote their speaker handbook for them. And I just like to give back to them because it was just a truly, truly profound experience for me.
I find my strong suit is when a talk isn't necessarily scripted, mainly because when I go to different places, I like to get there before my talk and maybe hear people before me, and get to meet more of the audience. And the advantage of that is I'll work stuff into the talk right up until And even during the time that I speak, something will come into my brain that says this needs to be said,
Sure.
much less what the event planners have already requested be included if there are any messagings and so on. But it's so much fun because that's what the audience really is going to relate to. If you're just up there reading a speech, they're not going to relate.
Yeah, no, listen, I am anti-PowerPoint. I am anti-cue cards. I am anti-anything. I love to just be able to be off the cuff. And obviously I know enough of my stuff to be able to get up there confidently and talk the talk. But the TEDx thing was something that was very unique. And like I said, I wasn't in front of a live audience where most people are for their talks. I would like to do it again because I would like the experience of doing it in front of a live audience. So I would like, I want to apply again to another TEDx talk, and I would like to have the full package experience next time.
I had a speech that I was scheduled to do. It was set up by a speakers bureau, and they told me what the audience was, what the organization was, and all sorts of stuff. I got there only to find out that the speakers bureau representative had no clue, and it was totally different than what I had come expecting to do. Ooh. Fortunately, what this organization was about was also something else that I had experience with. So I had 15 minutes to change on the fly. And that's why I love to have the ability to be a lot more flexible. And it makes for a much better speech.
Absolutely. I agree.
So it makes it a lot of fun. What's for you, what would you say is one of the most unique factors that people encounter when they work with you?
I mean, for me, you know, again, I'm definitely a unicorn in my industry because of my ability to use both sides of my brain simultaneously. My business acumen and my creative side. Most people who are creatives are exactly that. They're creatives. They're not great at the business acumen side, and vice versa. And for me, I'm incredibly strong in both areas, and I know that, and that is what makes me special. So I know that that's a very unique factor when people work for me. But I think that the other thing that unequivocally goes along with working with me is my sense of humor and keeping things really fun and keeping things really enjoyable. The process is enjoyable. I mean, having a sense of humor and infusing my humor in things appropriately, of course. The way that I work with my clients, you know, when they're having a good time, we all are having a good time and there's success across the board. So it's definitely a combination of my business acumen and my creativity, and also just bringing my sense of humor, whether it be to the stage or to the content that I'm helping them create, or, you know, just making them feel more at ease about the process.
Yeah. Having a sense of humor is really important. Now, I've heard people say, as a professional speaker, you shouldn't start off with a joke. And, you know, I certainly find that there are times when having humor up front actually helps break through to the audience, but there are ways to do it.
Well, you have to do it appropriately. I mean, you know, I have a history in performance. I have a background in performance. I'm no stranger to a stage. It doesn't bother me or scare me. I've done stand-up comedy when I lived in New York, and you know, I write the way that I sort of speak and talk, and so, but you have to do it appropriately. I mean, there are appropriate times for it, and then there are appropriate times for when you need to be, you know, you got to read the room. That's what I was saying. You got to read. You got to read the room.
You got to read the room. Absolutely. Yeah. One of the favorite things that I like to start with, especially if there is any kind of a disabilities component, but even not necessarily with that, I love to start by saying, I want to do a little bit of market surveying, and I'll ask a few questions like, do you know any blind people? And, you know, any number of questions like that, 3 or 4 questions. And one of 3 things happens. People, when I ask questions, raise their hands. Some people applaud, or most people applaud. And I have the person who introduced me stay up on the stage so I can get that sense of it. Sure. But the last question, especially when I know that some people are raising their hands, the last question is, so do you really think it's a bright idea that when a blind speaker asks you a question that you respond by raising your hand? And that has so often just drawn people in. It's so much fun because they know they're dealing with a person.
Yeah, you break the ice that way. That's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. And it's a lot of fun to do. And again, my belief is I don't talk to an audience, I talk with an audience.
One of my early taglines in my business was, it's a conversation, not a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel really strongly about that. I mean, everything that I do is, as I said, I really enjoy trying to create convivial atmospheres for my clients and for myself, and putting other people at ease. And, it's about the conversation. It's about listening. It's about really, engaging. And I agree with you. You're not talking at the audience, you're talking with them. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
And I love it when there is a chance at the end of a speech. Doesn't always happen, but at the end of a speech where we can have Q&A. And of course, if there is time for Q&A, it's getting people to ask questions, because people tend to be so shy, and getting people to actually open up and ask questions. And even though I'll say there is absolutely no question in the world that's off limits, it still takes a while. And actually, I've got a favorite story about that, which is that I spoke talking about keeping an audience attention. I spoke at a school, an elementary school in San Francisco, K-6. And the teacher said, now you can only talk for about 10 or 15 minutes. You're not going to hold these kids' attentions. And I said, okay. And 45 minutes later, I opened it up for questions. How are you not going to want to listen to somebody who's standing up there talking to you with a dog, right?
Right.
And so anyway, opened it up for questions. And a young man, third grade, a guy, of course, gets up, and his question was, and this is why I tell the story, because I say no questions off limits. How do blind people have sex?
In the third grade?
Yep.
God bless.
I know. And, so I said, look, no CIA interrogator is going to be able to ask a tougher question than that. But my response immediately was, it just popped into my head, the same way everyone else does. And if you want to know more, go ask your parents. I'm not dumb.
That's a very good answer. Well played. Well played.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And, when I start to tell that kind of a story, people will start to open up and ask questions. And so it's a lot of fun, and interacting with an audience is always fun. Of course, after speaking, oftentimes we'll go out into the lobby and sell Thunderdog. And I've got my best sales rep with me, the dog, Alamo, who's a black lab. So I'll take his harness off, tie him to one of the legs on the table where we're selling books. And he is out in front visiting with everybody. And of course, if they come to visit with him, then they have to buy a book anyway. And so he's a great crowd drawer and a crowd pleaser by any standard.
Everybody loves a dog.
Everybody. And you know what? He has discovered the law of maximum petability space. So he will lay down and stretch out every appendage as far as he can in every direction to get as much interaction from people as possible, especially when it's kids.
Smart boy.
Oh, yeah. Most all of the guide dogs I've ever had have been very smart about doing that. But they love it. And, it makes him feel good that he gets to be a part of it, and he gets the chance to relax and not be in the harness all the time.
Absolutely.
And it's a level of trust, but it's really a lot of fun. Well, what's one thing you stand for in your life?
I'd like to think that I stand for kindness. I think that I'm sort of always amazed at how often kindness is forgotten or put last or ignored. And I think that in today's world, I think personally, a lot of things could be dictated and solved or heard a little bit more if kindness was put toward the forefront of things.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very loving and kind home, and I care very deeply about family and friends, and I give back to my communities of people and organizations, I think, with kindness and integrity. And I don't know, I just, I think we've forgotten a little bit of kindness along the way. And I think that that's never lost on me. So I would like to hope that I stand for kindness. I would like to hope.
I would like to see us regain the art of conversation and listening and respecting other people's views. And of course, that's part of kindness also. But
Yeah,
we just seem to forget all of that.
I think we're just going through a weird shift. I think that there's sort of a perfect storm of things going on in our world between technology and the world itself and economics and just sort of humanity itself. But here's where I get hopeful. As I mentioned before, I think that sometimes it can get a little scary where social media can be so great and so harmful at the same time. Every time I sort of kind of lose a little bit of hope, then I'll see something really promising on social media or on the news. And it just takes that one story about a small act of kindness.
Yeah.
To kind of restore my faith. I've been the recipient of so many small acts of kindness that I really like to think that I love to put forth small acts of kindness because you can change the trajectory of somebody's entire being with a small act of kindness.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, that's just always been really important to me, but it's been taught to me by my family, my parents. So
well, I think we're best when we recognize that we're here to serve others first. It isn't about me. It's about all of us.
well, I think it goes back to what my mother always said. If you do the right thing, you never have to wonder if you did the right thing. So
Right. We do have a moral compass if we would only pay attention to it.
most of us do. I agree. I would say most of us do. Yes.
What would you advise for an entrepreneur starting out, or what kind of advice do you have that you would offer for people in business or just people in general?
Well, without question, I mean, my biggest message to entrepreneurs, especially, but just people in general, your network is your net worth. I mean, I myself have built 2 very successful businesses, absolutely on the merit and the cultivation and the care that I've given to my network. And it's like a garden, right? I feed it, I tend it, I pay attention to it, and I listen to it. And when you give back to your network, you get a lot from your network. And so people have to really understand the power of their network and how to utilize their network the right way. I teach a curriculum on best practices in networking, and it's something that's a very popular curriculum that I get hired for because I think that most people are inherently not great networkers. Back to one of your earlier points, I always talk about the fact that effective networking is, 90% listening and 10% talking. And I think people think it's the other way around.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about like going to a networking event and sitting in a room and networking. I'm talking about how to look at your centers of influence and your internal network and using it for good, for better, to make a difference, to make a change, to propel yourself, to help yourself, and to help others. So that for me would be my biggest message. And to learn how to do that successfully is, I think, the ticket to your success.
So when you're not financially advising or producing, what do you do to relax and have fun?
Well, I sing with my band, which is one of the most fun things that I do. I love my band. We have a blast. We perform, and it's just one of my favorite outlets. I spend time with my nieces, which is a great joy for me. I don't have children. I have 6 nieces. And I golf and I play pickleball. I am a huge pickleball fan. So I try to play pickleball anytime I can.
My nephew, since he is retired, has gotten into pickleball and plays several times a week. He's in a league where he lives and is just always playing pickleball. And it's something I never even heard of 2 years ago.
There's a reason it's the fastest growing sport in the world. It's so much fun. It's so easy and it's super social. And so I have become bit by the pickleball bug. And between that and golf, I keep myself very busy in the summertime.
Good for you. No pickleball during the snow though, huh?
No, I play paddleball in the winter. Actually,
okay.
Pickleball is a version of that, but it's meant for winter. So I play paddle in the winter.
Good for you. Well, Kim, this has absolutely been enjoyable and a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you coming on. If people want to reach out to you, maybe talk about hiring you, learn more about what you do and all that, how do they do that?
The best way to contact me is to visit me at milesinheels.com. That's milesinheels.com, milesinheels.com. And you can reach out to me there by sending me an email, all my social channels. Love connecting with people and broadening my audience. And, I was so glad to be approached by you, Michael, and I've loved our conversations. I think what you stand for and what you're putting out there in the world is just wonderful. And it's been an honor to get to know what you're doing for Accessibility. And it's made me look at different things very differently since knowing you. So thank you for what you're doing. And I've really had a fun time getting to know you and being here. So thank you.
Well, if we don't have Accessibility up on your site yet, we got to work on that.
Yes, that is it's one of my to-dos ever since meeting you. There's no question about it. Yes.
Always stuff to do, right?
Always stuff to do.
Well, for all of you listening, thanks for being here with us. And I hope you enjoyed Kim's observations and comments. I did. I learned a lot. This has been absolutely fun. Please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. We love 5-star ratings and love your feedback and your comments and anything that you'd like to say. You can reach me by email at michaelhi, MICHAELHI at accessibe.com. Or you can go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. But wherever you're listening, please, again, give us a 5-star rating. We'd love it. And also, Kim, for you and anyone listening, if you know of anyone else who you think ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, we want to hear from you. Please let us know, perform introductions or whatever. We're always looking for more people who want to help show us that we're all more unstoppable than we think. And Kim, one more time again, it's great to have you on, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.